I have Daniel Sayed, he is the head of Consumer and Customer Insights at IKEA Canada. Deanna Stacy, former VP of Customer Experience and Delivery at Porter Airlines. And then I have the moderator, which is Stella. I'm scared to say her last name because I don't want to mess it up, and it sounds like it's going to be very pretty. She's the managing director, former managing director at Questrade. Welcome them.
Just call me Stella, it's fine. We're good. Jeez.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, that's not a good start. We're good.
It's one of those.
We're good. All right, good morning, everyone. It's still technically morning, so I think I can say that. I'm Stella Lityszynski. I'm the former managing director of brand and marketing strategy at Questrade. I've spent most of my career leading brand strategy and fixing misconceptions of what a brand actually is. Because there's been a lot of misconceptions with respect to, a brand is a logo, a color, an ad, and it is so much more than that, because my viewpoint is that it is a promise that is consistently delivered across every single customer touchpoint. And when that promise is broken, that's where the gap exists and why customer experience is so imperative. And so joining me today, we have Daniel Said. He's the head of Consumer and Customer Insights at IKEA, and Deanna Stacy, the former VP of Customer Experience and Delivery at Porter Airlines. So please introduce yourself, provide a little bit more background as to what your experience has been and how you have created that consistent experience.
Yeah, absolutely happy to. Hi again, everybody. Daniel. I've been with IKEA for the last, seems like a long time, 4.5 years. I've always been in insights and research. I've done stints within the CPG vertical as well. So I was with Nestle for a bit. I've also had the opportunity to work in multiple markets. So been in Canada for 6+ years. I've spent some time in the US, and I am originally from Pakistan, so that's where I also spent a lot of time working with brands. Before I get to that question, I'll let Deanna introduce herself.
So I'm Deanna Stacy. As was said, I was a former VP of Customer Experience and Delivery at Porter. I did a lot of different things at Porter. I ran the loyalty program for 7 years. I ran Solutions Delivery, which is the project management group. At the end, the contact center, the last 2 years I was there as well. Our CSAT and NPS data reported into me, and then also built a digital UX UI team. We have some team members over there, my former colleagues, that was UX UI and research.
Great. Well, IKEA and Porter have very strong brands. And the question I have for you is, how do you ensure that the brand evolves in response to the customer expectations without losing its core? What's the balance and the reconciliation between the two?
Yeah, I can share my thoughts. I think it's I think the balance is between when it comes to the brand. I think if you anchor it within your values, and if you adapt it in execution and tactically through customer feedback, and I think the best way we've learned to do that, and we've experimented with that in the process as well. So when I say anchoring in values, one of our values has been to consistently innovate. Again, I think all of us strive to do that as well in the way we meet our customers. So the traditional IKEA model was always, you drive a certain distance, you go to certain areas. There was a visitation pull, and it made a lot of sense when it was designed back in the day. But we need to then evolve in terms of how we meet the customer. So the value was innovating consistently and trying to find ways to better meet our customers. Customer feedback suggested that we probably need to be more in urban centers as well. So some of you might have had a chance to visit our store in downtown Toronto. So it was a very iterative process in terms of how we still try to maintain the IKEA core brand promise, but then use customer feedback to adapt our offering. And I mean, customer feedback essentially is supposed to provide you a reality check, right? So to the promise that you provide through brand, you're supposed to consistently iterate. So even when we opened the new store, we initially were experimenting with a lot of things. Because it was a smaller store, we didn't give a traditional navigation and layout as we have in our larger stores. And a lot of our smaller stores have different formats across the world as well. But a lot of the feedback that we were getting from customers is when we go to the store, we don't know where to go because we're used to the way IKEA makes us shop and go through the store as well. So then we reverted back to still keeping that part from our traditional stores into the new stores as well. So I feel that's one slightly reductive, but one ways in which we did balance, still sticking to our values and anchoring our brand in those, and then using customer feedback to adapt.
Okay, great. Deanna, what about yourself?
So in thinking about this question, I actually thought back to when I started at Porter. So this is going to seem kind of low tech, but Porter was small, had a very strong brand, still does. The brand was flying refined. Everything reflected that. So from the uniforms to what was served in flight to how passengers were greeted. It was a small group. It was easy to maintain that. There wasn't feedback. There wasn't formal feedback. So we had CSAT and NPS data, but no one was accountable for that. That came to me in 2015. But there was organic feedback. And I think part of the reason why the brand stayed so strong is because it was small, whether it was passengers raving about Porter on their flight, at the airport, sending an email to Bob Deluce, who was the CEO and founder, and it was his vision. They knew from all of that that the brand was working. If there were any problems, they were quickly resolved. And so I think because A, it was small, you were able to understand it, and across the company, it was so clear what the brand promise and value was. I think shortly before I started, there was a creative director who kind of owned the brand, particularly from a digital and marketing perspective, but still making sure that all service and everything reflected that. And there was also a service delivery group just for in-flight, of the in-flight services, but it was crossed through the company. And again, this is in 2014, 2015. So those things, that structure, managed to keep that brand. And one of the things I noticed after I started is there was cost reductions. But I remember listening to some of the conversations of these cost reductions, and because the brand was at such core, things like we're going to keep glassware became a debate because how will that impact the brand?
Right.
Because there was such a strong understanding of the brand, they ended up really influencing those decisions.
Amazing. So let's talk about influence a little bit.
Yeah.
Insights teams are rich with data. They're sitting on it, there's flowing data there, but how do you actually ensure that the insights that you have with your teams are distributed across the organization to impact those business decisions, whether that be messaging, positioning, product design, and of course, experience? Deanna, why don't we start with you?
Sure. That's tough, and I don't think we ever perfected it while I was there, and I have some ideas of what could be done. A lot of times what would happen, particularly in the product design, revenue management would come up with a new product, do a lot of their own research, have their own business case, but that would reflect kind of revenue, not necessarily customer experience. And by the time it would get to the digital research team, it's been approved. This is what the product is. And then the digital research team would look at it and sometimes say, okay, this doesn't work, not just from a digital perspective, but from a customer experience perspective. We had these bundles, so it's a bundle of, whether seats and bag fees, and you can bundle into different things that a passenger could purchase. And when it came to the digital team, it was obvious that passengers were going to struggle with the selecting of it and the grouping of them, and we had to change that. So we tried to get earlier in the process, and part of that is just kind of kicking the door down or opening the door, or maybe you're not supposed to be there, or just when I would know we were talking about products and I would try to get the teams involved. I think the answer, though, is a cross-collaborative product and service delivery team and governance that reflects from digital to airports to in-flight across the organization. I think that's really critical. Because also these decisions were made without talking to frontline team groups. So sometimes we couldn't actually execute on it. So I think we didn't get there, but we were talking about that, and that's where we need to get to.
Yeah, I definitely agree with a lot of that. And I think one thing that I've been fortunate to experience at IKEA is giving insights a seat at the table. And I think a lot of it goes to org structures and how insights, where do they sit within the company. So to give IKEA Canada's example, my role reports into the Chief Commercial Officer, who reports into the CEO. So there is a very direct line to the C-suite in terms of making insights and using them to influence decision making. And then my peers would include head of marketing, head of CX, head of sales, customer experience, head of e-commerce, head of customer support. So we're all collectively driving the commercial agenda for IKEA Canada. So that makes it easy to collaborate with my peers who are, again, in charge of commercial, as opposed to that, in some of the other organizations I've been at or seen, sometimes insights would roll into marketing, sometimes insights would roll into digital, and each has their merits and demerits in terms of where it sits. But I feel if it's closer to commercial or more to closer to the driving impact on business metrics that matter, so more sales, revenue driven as well, you're forced to do a lot of closed loop measurement whenever you're doing insights. So it doesn't just start with doing the research and leaving it there, but making sure how it delivers on the final metrics and KPIs as well. So I think that's definitely one. And the other point, which has been very interesting in IKEA, has been being a part of a retail org. A lot of our final insight users are store teams. And store teams do not necessarily have insight trainings or certain prereqs in terms of how to understand and unpack data. So whenever we would interact and deliver a lot of the research to them, it was often, so what do we do with this? And I think that also helped us position insights in a way. So developing that culture as well in terms of now what or so what, that forces insights teams to, again, link things to the final, and it contributes to developing a culture of insights as well. I probably went on a tangent there, but
No, it's all good. It's all good. So you touched on, distributing the data and making sure that the teams understood it. Can you expand on how exactly you did that? Because there's one thing to have a dashboard and have those, KPIs that you're constantly looking at. It's another thing to distribute that data in a way that, your teams actually know how to act on the so what.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yes. So I think while my love language is Excels and dashboards, I think on right? But I think a lot of it is, so we just developed a tool which we're rolling out internally called My Insights. And the idea of that is for that final user audience, for them to not even understand how to interpret dashboards, but how, again, a lot of the generative AI has taught us to interact with all these different languages and models. You have a conversational way in terms of how you can pull insights out. So what's my customer in Etobicoke? What's their demographics, psychographics? So instead of even knowing those terms, you ask your questions. So I think you need to understand where your target audience is. And for our audience, and obviously in these constant conversations around AI, it has helped expedite some of those conversations. So I think that's how we've democratized a lot of our insights. Because, as you said, we can have a lot of dashboards, but even those require some fundamental understanding of interpreting, so some base data literacy as well. And I think it goes hand in hand in terms of how much focus or emphasis the org has on data literacy, because that's a prereq towards data and insight democratization as well. So I think that's been one example. And the other example, we try to emphasize a lot of storytelling, and I think it still needs to be leveraged to its full capacity. And I feel sometimes we in insight functions or who are closer to data are a little guilty of just, again, slamming everybody with a lot of data. So I think we still need to have the art of storytelling involved in it to be able to communicate our points across two teams.
And so there's a lot of qualitative data that is collected over, whether that is through NPS is quantitative, but even CSAT can be qualitative as well. Deanna, how have you communicated that? How have you influenced the organization to act on, the data that isn't as tangible as, let's say, an NPS score would be?
So when I started, and Porter was quite small at the simplest level, I had one analyst who actually had worked in the contact center was technology savvy and actually really understood airlines and airports. And we spent our time with every group. We would do monthly reviews with every different department, quarterly reviews with all of our different airports. And what's critical, and you mentioned about this, is we would go with, okay, these are the insights, and this is what we think you need to do with it.
Right.
And it had to be very tailored to that group. As we grew, that became harder, and we would do sentiment analysis because the passengers were doubling and tripling, and so our qualitative feedback was massive. So we're doing quarterly sentiment analysis. Obviously, we needed to start using AI to take that data and better understand what that means, and so that was starting to be used. And some of it was still from an ad hoc basis. Again, I believe, and where we were going on a product and service delivery team, taking that voice of the customer data and sharing it between those was important. Even with you could have AI, but you still need to be able to do that. One other thing I'd say on the last question that I think is really important to get team members that are not into data as much, so we have people that are at the airports or contact center, is integrating it to performance metrics. So taking customer CX metrics like CSAT and integrating it to their performance metrics. We did that at Porter. It went into their frontline bonus, and I couldn't believe the change I saw. There was, in terms of people coming to us and wanting to better understand the CSAT insights, it was a huge, huge difference.
So let's talk about omni-channel, right? Because it's one thing to have a digital experience, but both of your brands work across retail channels as well. And so the question here would be, how do you each approach ensuring that your brand promise feels consistent across every channel, regardless of what it is?
I think I'll be very brief, but I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of having a consistent customer feedback loop. So consistently measuring what do consumers and customers think about your brand. So what are the brand perceptions like? I'm sure a lot of people in the room work with brand equity tracking with the different providers as well. So I think that is one key component of it, and how are those changing? And then of course the other pillar would be CX, and how does that feed into, again, whatever the metric might be, CSAT, or what's the large language model that's analyzing all the verbatims, how is that feeding into that? So what's the feedback loop like? I think as long as those two things are done, you can or should be able to ensure that the experience is seamless across different touch points. So messaging, tonality, a lot of those things could differ, but from a customer standpoint, when they interact with any particular meeting point or touch point, they feel the same way, and the brand voice is consistent. So yeah, I think a lot of it goes back to your understanding of brand equity metrics and those feedback loops with customers.
So I'm going to throw a question at you that we touched a lot on influence. And Danielle, you have the benefit of sitting at the core of the customer insights team that reports into the chief commercial officer. Not many organizations are structured that way. What would you recommend to those that don't have that type of structure? How do you ensure that those insights are truly acted on across the organization without having that direct influence to the C-suite?
Yeah, I think I joke about it with teams often that I'm the self-proclaimed chief bullshit officer. So I will call bullshit whenever I see it, and I usually get away with it because I would then anchor that bullshit detector in terms of what the customers are thinking, right? And I think we often might not agree with our peers on everything, but it's important to keep the customer voice alive in whichever room you're in. And I feel when the discussion is swayed from what I think versus what you think versus what the customer thinks, I think that's one way to garner influence within the org. And I think the other part, which I feel generally as a society we need to foster more as well, and this is my social commentary, so stop me whenever I need to stop, but I mean we need to keep the curiosity alive, right? And I think we need to consistently ask questions, so regardless of wherever you are in the org, from a hierarchical perspective, you're still asking a lot of questions, so you're driving that perception and culture of curiosity within the organization. I'd say those would be the biggest pieces of advice. So even when Deanna mentioned about cross-functional forums and cross-functional collaboration as well, people bring you in because they feel you will ask the right questions, and you will always call other people out on, or bring everybody back to what the customer actually wants as well. And I feel that has helped me as well. So be annoying, be curious, and I think that'll
Love that.
should help.
Love the curiosity. And annoying, I'm not so sure
fair.
about, but curiosity, I absolutely love. So looking ahead, what do you think will most change with how organizations use those consumer insights? If you could give that one piece of advice to the leaders in this room trying to build a more insight-driven organization that is customer-centric at its core, what is that one insight and one piece of advice?
I mean, I think you can't be at any conference in North America today without hearing about AI in terms of when you talk about future.
Yeah.
So obviously, I think from a future perspective, AI will change how we get that data, how we get the insights, and be able to, flag your red burning customer feedback issues that need to be solved immediately. Potentially even for Porter, the operational, somebody that's actually in the moment having issues, to things that are kind of building up. And so I think that AI will take that data, put it to the right groups with the right recommendations. But that doesn't solve everything. That's just getting to the right group. Well, what do you then do with that data? I think accountability is critical, and we talked about structures, and I also reported to the chief commercial officer and the president. But I think when that data is going to different groups and there's more democratization of it, there has to be accountability to it. So whether it's part of performance metrics, as I said before, but overall that those different departments have accountability for how that feedback then influences the decisions they make in those departments. I think that's very critical, and that's one of the biggest things I would say.
Accountability.
Yeah.
I think definitely a plus one on embedding it into the performance of, because if you're serious about really driving change for any metric, you link it to everybody's bonuses. It sounds devilish, but I mean, then you drive change through that, right? And then I think, in terms of prediction, I'm horrible at it, so I try to avoid the question. But I think it comes back to I think getting as close as possible to real-time data collection. I think that's still. We have it in some avenues versus others, so however much real-time data we can integrate. And then I also thought we can get away with today without seeing AI.
Yeah, I know. I'm saying it to try and get away from it a little bit.
Yeah, but predictive analytics, right? Then AI should hopefully improve the quality of our forecasting and predictive modeling and analytics, which again is of varying qualities across different organizations, and whether it's goal setting or whatever the metrics might be. So I think those two things are very imminent and seem like what should. So yeah, getting close to both of those.
So AI, implementation, and accountability.
I think having the right structure around it, you can't assume that AI is going to solve all your problems. Right. So there is a people aspect to it. So it's accountability, right structure around that. And I think for at least at Porter, I'm assuming it's the same with IKEA, again, there's a big collaboration piece that's required.
Exactly.
So you can send that data to those different departments, and they can focus on whether it's airports or stores, but how does that then integrate to the digital experience, to your in-flight experience, for example. So also how you collaborate is critical as well.
You agree?
Yeah, I'm nodding aggressively, so yeah.
Well, I think we have some time for questions, if anybody has any. Go ahead. Right over there.
Thank you so much. First of all, I'm Swedish. Every time I tell people I'm Swedish, they go, IKEA! So you're doing something right with the brand name. On the topic of the more systemic change and the accountability, you brought up many interesting points. Often thinking about how frontline staff could incorporate this into any interaction with a customer or whatever it may be. I'm curious how you see things shifting at the very top of the house. And to explain that a little bit further, I'm thinking, what is the incentive at the commercialization office, at the CEO office, the C-suite, to actually take these metrics seriously? why should they care whether or not we have a good customer experience? Do they see the value?
I mean, definitely, because it impacts revenue. I mean, at Porter, if you have a bad experience, you're going to then fly another airline. There are integrations in airlines with their operational data as well, and they both impact each other. But they're very much understand at a senior level the importance of satisfaction because it impacts your customers returning. I'm assuming that's the same at IKEA.
I would absolutely agree. I mean, and you bring up a good point because even so Salwin, who's our CEO, even if you attend a lot of his conferences and talks, he often starts with quoting insights or data about customers as well. So I think that also then goes back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of driving a culture of insights and again some storytelling, showing some curiosity, and yeah, I mean because there is a lot of onus on us in insights or CX orgs as well to make sure they understand the value of why they should care. And I mean, the simpler answer is to make it connected to metrics such as market share, brand penetration, sales, revenue, because then it makes the discussion pretty objective. MMMs is another great tool. I often memorize the results whenever I'm having a conversation with a CFO because it ties every incremental dollar to sales and revenue as well, right? So it's then it makes it automatically easier, and they have to care.
I'm curious about specifically that link between the accountability. At the very start of the conversation, we said there's not really accountability for CSAT stuff or NPS necessarily, and thinking about how that evolves so that they, I mean, we're on the same team in this room, I believe, but that they really see the value of this. They know that they have to care and that it fundamentally should be a metric that they are tracked against.
Sorry, what's the question?
The question is is the accountability at the very top better now than it was 5 years ago, or are we just automating a poor experience?
I mean, I can say at Porter, yes. I think there is that understanding. There is always, and you're talking about CFO, I mean, I in the contact center, so there would be discussions about, well, why don't we do a longer call time? And part of that is proving the impact to that. An impact from a customer perspective, and then what that overall will do. So there is teaching that has to happen at times. I would say, though, again, when we actually tied CSAT to performance metrics, seeing that change, I think was really, eye-opening at a certain point to some of the executives as well. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we're getting the look right now. So thank you all for sitting in on the session. Hope you got some takeaways.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stella, Deanna, and Daniel. Very great, insightful discussions.